Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks, the podcast where we help doctors unlock the secrets to building generational wealth. And today we're talking 529 plans, how they work, where they fall short, and whether they're right for you. The financial world is very siloed, and no one is putting together the whole picture for you.
The wealthy build wealth based on leverage because it's a non-taxable event.
Welcome back to Wealth Mavericks. We're so glad you're here. Today, I'm joined by Bob Wolf, and we are going to talk about a topic that comes up with a lot of our members who are parents, and that is 529 plans. For most of us who have kids, these seem like a no-brainer when it comes to saving for education, but are they really the best option long-term? So Bob, I'd love to get your thoughts. What do you think about 529 plans?
Hey, Erin, good to be back. It's one of those topics, I think, like most topics when we're talking about assets and planning for the future. But I think this is a little more, something that's a little more close to the heart because it's usually about taking care of your kids. And we all want to make sure our kids have a better future than maybe the past we had as in our own growing up. Of course, appreciating all the wonderful aspects that we had growing up and the benefits that our parents provided us. But a lot of times we're in different positions. And that's really the case with a lot of our members, right? A lot of them are first generation physicians. A lot of them have come and their parents have struggled. We've heard these stories to give them the best leg up, the best foot forward, so to speak. And so we see this as something that our members want to do as a planning strategy, as hey, I'm going to take care of my kids because these are the things that they hear about all the time, right? And these 529 plans and what is it? So let's talk about very basics, if I could, the very basics of what a 529 plan is. And then maybe we can go into, if you're okay with it, or unless there's any other questions you pop up with from member conversations, my opinion and what this means for our particular members and the things that we've seen. Cool. So 529 plan is a higher education plan that is designed to save for that higher education. So unlike other plans where it usually is just for college, 529 plans tend to be for any expense that is higher education. So it could be trade schools, for example, not just college or university, which is very cool. And a lot of people don't know that. It could be for any costs associated with higher education. So not just tuition, but books, and not necessarily room and board per se, but typically the cost of the actual tuition, books, supplies, that fun stuff. Not beer money. That doesn't count. No reimbursements for that. But 529 plans, when you put your money in there, you have the ability to allow it to grow, and the growth is tax-free, very similar to maybe like a Roth IRA, but specifically for education. Like a Roth IRA, if you take your money out for anything other than retirement, you're going to get penalized 10%. On a 529 plan, it's going to be the same thing. You take your funds out for anything other than higher education, then you'll get penalized the 10%. Now, due to Roth IRAs, because they're still a fairly new tool in the financial world, they just came out with rules and legislation that if you have these dollars that have been in 529 plans for a certain period of time, then you can roll a certain amount of that into a Roth IRA, because the higher education, your kids are no longer in school, or and you still have these funds that are kind of locked away in these types of plans. And if you took the money out, what would happen? You get penalized, right? So has been some legislation that has changed the ability to do that. I'm not going to talk about that because there's things that are ever changing in that space, especially right now, the time of this recording, with a lot of the tax law changes. There's just a lot of, I think, uncertainty. And so I'd rather not talk about specifics, if that's okay. I think really what the goal is do we feel like these are a good strategy for members and for high income earners? So originally when this came out, these 529 plans came out, it was really part of a wealth transfer strategy where you could pre-fund. A grandparent could set up a 529 plan for a grandchild and pre-fund 5 years in advance for each grandchild, for each grandparent. So technically 11,000, I believe is 10 or $11,000 at the time. It was, 15 plus years ago. So my memory may be a little rocky at that point, but essentially you could have $55,000 one time go into each of the grandchild's accounts. That's pretty cool. And it wouldn't affect the estate gift taxing and from an estate planning perspective. So that was kind of the original. Now we're, 15 plus years removed from that. Now what is this tool? And does it make sense for me and my kids? So I think the answer to that, Erin, if we can go down that direction, is I think the answer to that, it depends. Like most times we're asked by our members, do you think fill in the blank? My response a lot of times is, well, it depends. On what? Well, it's an asset. 529 plan's an asset. It's a tool. So, we work with a lot of medical professionals, whether in the dental, chiropractic, or the human medical space. And as a medical professional, every patient's different, but you do have certain tools that you use in certain situations to create that best outcome of health for that patient. And the same would be true for us, is which tools will we use to create the best benefit for you and your situation, not just now, but moving into the future, right? Also with the flexibility for you to change and your situation to adjust, which is obviously what happens in our lives, right? And not get kind of pigeonholed into a particular thing that now we're stuck. And what comes to my mind a lot of times is retirement plans. That's one of those things where I like to say we imprison our money, right? We put our money into this asset that's deemed for retirement and it's locked away. You get to visit it, right? You get to go online and look at your account balances. You can print out statements. You can visit it and see how it's doing, but you don't get access to that capital or that liquidity until you hit a certain age. Right now it's 59 and a half. But what happens if you build out your portfolio like a lot of our members do? They're top 1%. They are the wealthy. You are the wealthy. If you're a medical professional watching this, you are the top 1%. Your situation's different than everybody else's, right? So in the 529 space, it's the same thing where we got to look at what it's for. Well, it's for higher education. Well, higher education is also changing. Changing. Erin, we've seen a change in higher education in just the last 10 years since, if we look back, what's happened? 10 years ago, everybody had to get a college degree, right? It was kind of that thing. And to the point where master's degrees were like the new real college degree, right? Your 4-year college degree was kind of like your higher high school diploma, right? I mean, it was the basics. And when you go to a lot of these universities and you look at a lot of their, degrees, some of them tout, we have 250 degrees. Holy cow. Wow. To me, that doesn't create scarcity. That doesn't create something that I need to do, especially when you look at the workforce and you ask people, would you get your degree in? Do you use it? And how many people say, yes, no, I don't use it. Right. And so on and so forth. I'm not saying higher education is a bad thing, and I'm not saying plan for higher education is not a good thing either. What I'm saying is that it's evolving and changing. And so what we have found when it comes to working with the wealthy, when it comes to working with those that have means, access to capital is more important to the planning process than locking up our capital for a specific purpose that may not occur. For example, I have 3 kids. They're all adults, right? My youngest is 19. My oldest is 23. My middle's 21. She's the only one that is in higher education right now. The other 2, we call them the bookends because of their personalities. My oldest is a boy and the 2 others are girls. They aren't in higher education. My son loves blue collar. He loves hands-on learning. So he did a stint in great student, got straight A's, got an academic scholarship to Gonzaga. And I mean, smart kid. So it's not because he couldn't qualify or wasn't of that mindset, right? Same thing with my youngest, straight A's, right? But some people aren't built for that. They're built for something else. whatever that something else is. So if I had put away the amount of money that was needed for them to have a higher education, my money would be imprisoned. I wouldn't have access to it. I could not use those funds to go build other areas of wealth because my bookends didn't go to college, right?
So then what happens with a 529 if your kid decides not, it's in their name and then they decide not to pursue higher education, they get right into a business or whatever, then what happens with that money?
So that's a good question. So it's actually not in their name, it's for their benefit.
Oh,
it's
okay.
usually in the parent's name.
Yeah.
So, or a guardian's name. And so let's say yours would be in your name. It'd be for the benefit FBO, just like an IRA.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense.
When your money's sitting in a traditional IRA at Fidelity for FBO for the benefit of Erin, right? This would be the same thing for any one of your kids. Now, in some of the regulations that have changed, you can switch the beneficiaries. That's the beauty of it. You can switch it to anyone. And so now they have a laundry list of who qualifies. Family members, in-law, right? Because of the initial, hey, we put all this money away, our kids are now out of, and there was enough of people where their kids were out of college age or didn't go to college. And you have all this money sitting in these 529 plans, 529 plans. What do we do with this? You can take your money out, pay the taxes on the gains, pay the 10% penalty for early withdrawal, or legislation can change. And that's what's happened. And legislation probably will continue to change in this area if people continue to put money in this arena. Also with 529 plans, it really is state specific. So for example, let's say I got a 529 plan for California, where I originally had lived with my kids growing up, going to high school initially, and we moved to Texas. Well, that 529 plan was technically tax-free for California schools in California. What if I left? Right. And so each plan, when the law passed, was state specific. So you could go, I knew some where they got plans based on a particular type of investment firm, like a mutual fund company or whatever, and it was domiciled, or the plan was designed in a separate state. Right. So I don't think the way it was originally created really blends well with the flexibility of what we want to do as Americans, or how we want our kids to go to certain schools, or they want to go to qualify to certain schools, or whatever the case may be. There's not a lot of flexibility, I guess, is my point. So what are our options? What do we think? Well, me specifically, why couldn't you have a separate brokerage account? Why couldn't you have a real estate asset? Why couldn't you invest in a business that the funds for that particular real estate or that asset or that business was specific to help your kids go to school? And if they didn't, couldn't that asset still be beneficial for them to learn how to build wealth and how to invest? If you and I are interested in investing in real estate, for example, why wouldn't we put ourselves in a position where we teach our kids how to invest in real estate? And if one or two properties, or depending on a part of portfolio, would eventually be for the kids' education, would it be beneficial for us, especially if you think your kid's going to go into business, right? A lot of our doctors think their kids are going to go into doctoring, right? Maybe not. Maybe they get grandma's genes, and grandma, is an educator and she loves teaching. And all of a sudden now your child is saying, Mom, Dad, I want to go be a preschool teacher.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And you have 300,000 saved away for their medical degree that they're not going to get. What do you do with that? So that's kind of my point is that we have to have flexibility in how we build things. And so am I saying it's a bad asset and it's a bad area? No, not at all. I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying you have to be realistic in the plan and have a conversation and a dialogue of what's this look like. So maybe you should put some money aside in the realms that they will be going to college, and you have this funds, but not all the funds, and you have some funds in another asset. And if they decide not to go to college, well, then you have this other asset that could be used for something else that you determine, because you're the one that's in control of that asset. And so that's really when we have any type of dialogue with any of our members, when we go, hey, Bob, question. And my response is, It depends. That's why.
So this is really the problem we help our members solve in so many areas, is like, have this money here. What do I do with it? Because the more you have, the more options you have. And it's like overwhelming to think, what is the best one? And so me personally, hearing you talk and about funds versus brokerage, for our 3 kids, we've been putting into a brokerage with the idea that, oh, that's like a slush fund for college. But then we had kind of abandoned the funds that we opened, and now we've started contributing to them again. So it's like some's going to 529, some's going to the brokerage. Traditionally, like, which performs better, or what are the different tax implications of each of those? Like those should be the determining factors, right? So I guess even I'm like, I don't understand what makes more sense.
Yeah, no, absolutely. The taxation is, and that's the nice thing about a 529 plan, is as it grows, it's tax free, right?
All so you don't have to work. Is tax free as long as you use it for education. Okay.
Yeah. So, that's a beautiful thing. In a brokerage account or a savings account, you get a 1099 at the end of the year. That means it's taxable income based on the activity in that brokerage account. So let's say you buy Apple stock, for example. Well, Apple stock does pay a dividend. So that dividend, you don't sell the stock, you keep the stock and you hold on to it. And so it's appreciating and growing, and you have gains on that, but you're not selling the stock. So you don't have to pay taxes on the gains, but it does have a dividend. And that dividend gets sent to you or into your brokerage account, and you will get a 1099 for that dividend, and you would have to pay taxes on that dividend. Well, that affects your rate of return. So if it's appreciating at 30% and you get a percentage of the dividend is now taxable, that tax cost should offset, or you should be calculated in your rate of return of that holding that stock. But it's a paper return, right? There's no realization because hasn't been sold. Right. So what I like about brokerage accounts is, in most assets that you have access to, so real estate would be the same thing, cash value life insurance, right? You could also have cash value life insurance, what we call the bank of you, where we structure a policy that a portion of that dollars, you have your 529, you have your bank of you, you have your brokerage account, you have this diversification of assets, each built for a specific reason and purpose, but also flexible enough to be able to grow with the difference of what happens with your children, right? When they become young adults and they enter that stage of life. But with a brokerage account, you could always leverage that asset, meaning use the underlying stock, don't sell it, but you get a margin or an underlying loan from Fidelity or whoever the brokerage is, and you're borrowing money. And you can pay for their education as a needs basis off of that, right? Without selling. And now you don't have that taxable effect. Well, why would anybody do that? Now it's a debt, right? Now we're talking against what some other gurus, quote unquote gurus, talk about. The wealthy build wealth based on leverage because it's a non-taxable event. If you were to sell your account, and this is not investment advice, so let me disclaim this, right? This is just for educational purposes. We're not telling people to do anything. We don't know you as you're listening to this. This is not advice, but I'm just talking about in generalization, education of, if you have all this Apple stock and you don't sell it, you can borrow money and it can be used as collateral as you borrow money. Yes, there will be a cost for that borrowing, but that cost of that borrowing could and should be less than the 15 or 20% capital gain tax on selling it. So why would you sell your asset, pay tax, no longer have that asset growing and appreciating, and then go spend the money on something like an education, right? There's no return on that education in that asset. Right? The return on that education is your child becoming whatever that education is going to lead them to in their future earnings, right? That's the rate of return of education, which isn't always in the college realm, like we were talking about initially. So there's a lot of options depending on somebody's situation. That's why we say it depends.
Yeah.
It depends. And so we got to look at the whole picture, figure out what you want this picture to look like, because it may look like this now, but it may be completely different by the time we get to that step and stage.
Okay. So, I mean, I have a member right now who is talking specifically about this. They have two little kids and they just want to pre-fund their 529s with a bunch of money. And they're wondering about the tax implications. And they're also wondering, like, hey, can this be a business expense? Where no, you can't use pre-tax dollars because you're getting the tax benefits later. Okay.
Correct. And
But what I hear
that kind of goes back to where I was saying, well, maybe if you owned a piece of property, right, a real estate, and you bought a single family home, for example, as an investment, right? There's expenses associated with that get offset from the income that's generated. So that could be, right? And so it depends.
Totally. And it's complicated. And you help people connect all these dots. Like if it were easy, and that is why people do it because, well, this is just easy. Like I have this money, I need to save for education,
Exactly.
but how does it fit into your overall big picture? And like you said, most people that, the Dave Ramsey's and Susie Orman's talk to, they don't have a lot. They just have a little they can scrimp aside each month and they're proud of that. And that's wonderful. But when you have a lot to work with, it's probably not the best idea to put it all in one vehicle. You want to diversify and make it all work together for your overall benefit. That's what I hear you saying.
Yeah. And an overall plan, right? Everything in that plan has a purpose. And it's not just we want to grow and become wealthy purpose. But what's the exit strategy? Like I was just saying, right? With the Apple stock as an example, if you sell it, then it creates a capital gain. If you have 529 plans and you do use it or you don't use it, what's that? That's the exit strategy. Yeah. So every asset you go into, you should know what the exit strategy is before you go into it.
Yeah.
Doesn't mean that, fine, it's written in stone, this is the way it is. No. But what's the purpose of this asset? And that's the thing we always talk about. What's the purpose? When we look at their existing assets, why did you set this up? What was the purpose for this? And is it still doing that purpose for you today? Or has things changed in your life? Because that's what happens. Things change. Great. What do we need to do to help this asset meet your new purpose if things have changed?
So the takeaway here is that we are not saying 529 plans are amazing or the wrong idea. It depends. They're a great tool in your overall plan. Before we wrap up, I'll bring a personal anecdote in here. We were all together last week in Texas as a team, learning, training, planning for the rest of the year, team building. And Bob was talking about what he has done for his own kids to help set them up for success and some of the education he's giving them. And I became very overwhelmed with emotion in that moment and started to cry, just realizing the power of what I'm going to be able to do for my kids in learning these things, in speaking this language, in starting to set these things up for them, teaching them, and then them being able to teach their kids. And we were talking about Terra Firma Kids and all of this education that we're pouring into our members that will not only change our members' lives, but their kids and future generations. We are truly building a legacy because people don't understand this. And what we talk about all the time is that, the financial world is very siloed. And no one is putting together the whole picture for you unless you are super, super wealthy and have a whole family office doing it for you. But they don't teach this in college, medical school. You have to go out and find it yourself. And so much of what is out there will tell you the what, but they won't tell you the how. And so I was just so overcome in that moment. Thank you, God, for putting me in this room that I can change my family's future. And I hope that that's the way our listeners and our members feel. Thank you for putting Terra Firma and Bob in my path, because now I'm one step closer to being able to speak this language and set this up right for my kids and future generations. So I just so appreciate everything you share with us, Bob.
Of course. And, the funny thing is that none of this is my idea. It's all education that I desired myself. Hundreds, if not thousands of books and pages of information and courses and you name it. But that was what was interesting to me. And so I spent that time. I didn't go to medical school. This is the school I went to is learning this stuff. So, that's the one thing we realize is that most people aren't taught how to use what they accumulate. They're taught to accumulate, but not how to use it. And I think that's the missing piece in the planning process. And that makes a big difference. When you think about it, that's probably going to be 80-90% of why you do things is because you need to how for a purpose. So, but no, I appreciate you saying those kind words. And then, this is what community is about. This is what membership at Terra Firma is about. It's about caring and taking care of each other in a safe space, in a space that we can have these conversations, even when our members go, this sounds like a really basic question. I love those.
Yeah.
I love those because that means you feel confident and comfortable enough to be vulnerable, because now you're in a position that you feel safe, you can do so. And that means the world to me, rather than someone come out with this, 8-part question that takes an entire 2 pages of scrolling in an email.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for all that you've done to bring us here. And Doc, we appreciate you listening. We hope you will subscribe and share and join us next time. Thanks for being here. Have a great day. And until next time, go be a wealth maverick.